The scent of jasmine and vanilla lingered in the air as Rebecca Turner hurried through the crowded terminal of O'Hare International Airport. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, a stark contrast to the click-clack of expensive heels and the rumble of luxury rolling luggage surrounding her. She'd saved for months to afford this economy ticket from Chicago to New York, scraping together tips from her 3 part-time jobs. At 26, she was finally pursuing her dream of becoming a pastry chef, having secured a 3-month apprenticeship at a small but respected bakery in Manhattan. Final boarding call for Flight 1842 to LaGuardia, the announcement blared overhead, sending Rebecca into a near sprint. She clutched her small purse tightly, containing her life savings of $800, her phone with a cracked screen and a tiny bottle of homemade perfume, her grandmother's recipe, the only inheritance she'd received when the elderly woman passed 2 years ago. Rebecca made it just in time, breathlessly handing her boarding pass to the attendant, who gave her a practiced smile. Finding her middle seat between a businessman who frowned at her flushed appearance and a woman already asleep against the window, Rebecca settled in for the flight, dabbing a drop of her perfume on her wrists to calm her nerves. 5 rows ahead in first class, Jackson Reed sipped his sparkling water, barely glancing up from his tablet displaying the quarterly reports of Reed Enterprises, his family's hotel empire worth billions. At 34, Jackson had built a reputation as a ruthless businessman with an uncanny ability to turn failing properties into luxury destinations. His angular features, permanently serious expression, and tailored suits created an intimidating presence that served him well in boardrooms. "Anything else before takeoff, Mr. Reed?" the flight attendant asked with extra attentiveness. "No, thank you," he replied curtly, returning to his reports. Jackson had just finalized the purchase of a historic building in the heart of Manhattan, planning to transform it into his most ambitious boutique hotel yet. The New York trip was meant to oversee the initial renovation plans, a project he'd personally championed against his board's hesitation. The flight passed uneventfully, with Rebecca sketching pastry designs in her worn notebook while Jackson made notes on architectural plans. Neither knew their lives were about to collide in ways neither could imagine. At LaGuardia, Rebecca waited patiently at baggage claim, watching as elegant suitcases circled the carousel. Her own luggage was unmistakable, a faded blue duffel bag patched with colorful fabric scraps, containing her few belongings, and most importantly, her grandmother's handwritten recipe book and her prized set of pastry tools purchased second-hand. When a sleek black suitcase with a small blue ribbon tied to the handle emerged, Rebecca stepped forward. She had attached the ribbon to make her borrowed suitcase, a loan from her former boss, more recognizable. Grabbing it quickly, she headed toward the subway, already calculating how to stretch her limited funds during her stay in the city. Jackson stood several feet away, his attention divided between an urgent phone call with his project manager and watching for his luggage. When his black Rimowa suitcase appeared, he ended the call abruptly, reaching for the bag. Only when he arrived at his waiting town car did he notice something was amiss. The blue ribbon he used to identify his bag among the many similar luxury suitcases was missing. "Is everything all right, Mr. Reed?" his driver asked, noticing Jackson's frown. "Fine," he muttered, assuming the ribbon had simply fallen off during handling. "Take me to the site first, then the hotel." Meanwhile, Rebecca arrived at her temporary accommodation, a tiny room sublet from a friend, in a crowded apartment in Queens. Exhausted from the journey and the emotional weight of her big move, she placed the suitcase on the bed and unzipped it. "Oh no," she whispered, staring at the contents in disbelief. Instead of her modest belongings, the case contained expertly folded designer clothes, a leather laptop case, and several folders marked Reed Enterprises Confidential. Her heart raced as she realized her mistake. She had taken someone else's suitcase, which meant someone else had hers. Her recipes, her tools, her clothes, everything she needed for her apprenticeship was gone. Panic washed over her as she checked the luggage tag. Jackson Reed, with a Manhattan business address and a phone number. With trembling fingers, she dialed, only to reach a voicemail. She left a nervous message explaining the mix-up and providing her contact information, hoping he would call back quickly. Her apprenticeship started tomorrow, and without her tools and recipes, she might lose this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Across town, Jackson arrived at his construction site, immediately immersed in discussions with architects and contractors. Only hours later, when he returned to his penthouse suite at one of his family's hotels, did he finally open the suitcase. The moment the zipper parted, a delicate scent escaped, jasmine and vanilla with hints of something unidentifiable, but utterly enchanting. Jackson paused, momentarily transported by the fragrance that seemed to evoke memories of summer gardens and warmth he hadn't experienced since childhood visits to his grandmother's country home, before the family business consumed his existence. His momentary reverie shattered as he registered the contents: simple clothing, a worn notebook, and a wooden box containing pastry tools. Whoever owned this bag clearly had little in terms of material wealth. He noticed a small glass bottle, obviously the source of the captivating scent. As he examined it, his phone alerted him to a voicemail from an unknown number. Rebecca's voice came through, apologetic and clearly distressed about the mix-up. There was something about her tone, genuine and unpretentious, that stood out in Jackson's world of calculated business interactions. He found himself listening to the message twice before calling her back. "Hello," Rebecca answered immediately, hope evident in her voice. "This is Jackson Reed. You have my suitcase," he stated matter-of-factly. "Yes, I'm so sorry. I can bring it to you right away. I just really need mine back before tomorrow morning. Dad has everything I need for my apprenticeship, and I'll send my driver to exchange the bags," Jackson interrupted, not accustomed to lengthy explanations. Yet something made him add, "This perfume, it's unusual." There was a pause before Rebecca replied, "It was my grandmother's recipe. She was a gardener and used to make it from flowers she grew." The pride in her voice was unmistakable. "I see," Jackson said, suddenly curious about the woman behind the voice and the scent. Against his usual efficiency, he found himself asking, "This apprenticeship you mentioned, what is it?" "I'm training to be a pastry chef. It's a 3-month program at Bellini's Bakery in Manhattan. I've been saving for years for this opportunity," she explained, her passion evident even through the phone. Something about her determination resonated with Jackson, reminding him of his own early days proving himself in the family business. Before he could analyze his actions, he heard himself saying, "I'll bring the bag myself. Text me your address." The words surprised them both, leaving a moment of silence before Rebecca thanked him and ended the call. As Jackson arranged to postpone his evening meeting, he couldn't explain why he felt compelled to deliver the bag personally rather than sending an assistant as he normally would. Perhaps it was the scent still lingering in his penthouse, or perhaps it was the refreshing sincerity in her voice, qualities rarely encountered in his world of wealth and strategic relationships. What Jackson couldn't know was that this simple luggage mix-up would set in motion events that would challenge everything he thought he wanted from life, while Rebecca remained completely unaware that the man coming to her door was not just any businessman, but one of the wealthiest hotel magnates in the country, who found himself inexplicably charmed by her grandmother's perfume. Rebecca paced nervously around the tiny room, occasionally glancing out the window at the unfamiliar Queens neighborhood, now bathed in evening light. She ran her fingers through her long, dark brown hair, a nervous habit since childhood. The mirror reflected her anxious brown eyes and sun-kissed complexion, features inherited from her Mexican mother, along with a determination that had carried her through countless hardships. She straightened her simple t-shirt and jeans, wishing suddenly that she had something more impressive to wear when meeting someone important enough to have confidential business documents. The cramped apartment, with its mismatched furniture and thin walls through which neighbors' conversations filtered, made her even more self-conscious about her circumstances. Her phone chimed with a text, "Downstairs in 5 minutes, J.R." Taking a deep breath, Rebecca grabbed the expensive suitcase and headed down the 4 flights of stairs, her heart racing with each step. Outside, she immediately spotted the sleek black car that seemed almost alien against the backdrop of the working-class neighborhood. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Jackson Reed emerged, his imposing 6'2" frame dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of Rebecca's rent. His expression was unreadable as he assessed the young woman standing nervously before him, clutching his suitcase. "Ms. Turner?" he asked, his voice controlled and professional. "Yes, that's me. Thank you so much for coming personally. I really appreciate it," Rebecca said, the words tumbling out quickly. She extended the suitcase toward him, noticing how her chipped nail polish contrasted with his manicured appearance. Jackson nodded, taking his luggage while his driver retrieved Rebecca's duffel from the car. When the blue bag was placed beside her, she visibly relaxed, quickly unzipping it to ensure her treasured recipe book and tools were inside. "Everything there?" Jackson asked, surprised by his own interest. Rebecca nodded, relief washing over her features as she carefully touched the wooden box containing her tools. "Yes, thank you. These tools belong to my grandmother. She taught me everything I know about baking." Something in her genuine attachment to these clearly well-used items stirred Jackson's curiosity. In his world, possessions were status symbols, easily replaced and upgraded. Her obvious emotional connection to these heirlooms seemed almost foreign. "Bellini's is a good bakery," he commented, surprising himself again. "Small, but they supply several upscale restaurants." Rebecca's eyes widened. "You know it? I applied 3 times before they accepted me. Mr. Bellini only takes 1 apprentice a year." A light rain began to fall, and Jackson found himself saying, "Would you like to continue this conversation somewhere dry? There's a coffee shop around the corner." Rebecca hesitated, checking the time on her cracked phone screen. "I should probably prepare for tomorrow. I own several restaurants in the city," Jackson said, making a split-second decision. "I might have some useful insights for your apprenticeship." This wasn't entirely untrue. His hotel empire included award-winning restaurants, but Jackson wasn't sure why he was prolonging this encounter. Something about Rebecca's unguarded enthusiasm felt refreshing after endless meetings with people who wanted something from him. "Okay," Rebecca agreed, curiosity overcoming her hesitation. "Let me just drop my bag upstairs." 20 minutes later, they sat in a modest cafe, a stark contrast to the exclusive establishments Jackson typically frequented. He watched as Rebecca added a single packet of sugar to her coffee, carefully stirring as she spoke about her culinary dreams, with an openness that was both foreign and fascinating to him. "I want to blend traditional techniques with unexpected flavors," she explained, her entire face lighting up. "My grandmother believed food should tell a story and evoke memories. That's why I create desserts inspired by my Mexican-American heritage, combined with classic French techniques." Jackson found himself genuinely listening, captivated by her passion. "And the perfume? That's also your grandmother's influence?" Rebecca smiled, the first unguarded expression he'd seen from her. "Yes, Rosa Turner was quite a woman, American by birth but traveled throughout Europe and Mexico studying both culinary arts and natural perfumery. She believed scents and flavors were deeply connected." She paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry, I'm rambling." "No, please continue," Jackson urged, realizing he was genuinely interested. "She left me her recipes, both culinary and perfume, when she passed. The jasmine vanilla blend you smelled is her signature scent. I wear it to feel close to her, especially during important moments like today." Jackson nodded, suddenly remembering something. "There was a notebook in your bag." "I didn't read it, but it looked important." "My recipe journal," Rebecca confirmed. "Adaptations of my grandmother's recipes and my own creations. Without it, I'd have been lost tomorrow." Their conversation flowed surprisingly easily, with Rebecca sharing stories of growing up with a single mother who worked multiple jobs, and her grandmother who taught her to find beauty and possibility even in difficult circumstances. Jackson shared little about himself in return, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease, yet found himself increasingly drawn to her refreshing perspective on life. As they prepared to leave, Jackson made another impulsive decision. "Bellini supplies some of my hotels. I'm visiting their main kitchen tomorrow for a tasting. Perhaps I'll see you there." Rebecca looked surprised. "That seems unlikely. Apprentices probably don't participate in tastings with important clients." "We'll see," Jackson replied with a hint of a smile that transformed his usually serious face. Later that night in his luxurious penthouse, Jackson found himself unusually distracted during a conference call with international investors. The scent of jasmine and vanilla seemed to linger in his memory, along with the image of Rebecca's animated expressions as she talked about her passion for pastry. On impulse, after ending the call, he phoned Marcus Bellini, the owner of the bakery where Rebecca would begin working tomorrow. "Jackson, to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" Marcus answered, clearly surprised to hear from one of his most prominent clients directly. "I'm calling about your new apprentice, Rebecca Turner." "Ah yes, starts tomorrow. Impressive technical skills in her application, though completely unconnected in the industry." "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, concern evident in his voice. No problem. In fact, I'd like her involved in tomorrow's tasting for the new hotel project. There was a pause before Marcus replied cautiously, That's highly unusual. She hasn't even started her training yet. I understand she has some innovative ideas about flavor combinations. I'm interested in seeing what she might bring to the table, Jackson stated, in the tone he used when expecting compliance. Of course, Mr. Reed. If that's what you want, Marcus agreed, knowing better than to question further. Reed Enterprises represented a significant portion of his business. Excellent. And Marcus, don't mention my involvement. I'd like her participation to appear as a regular opportunity. After ending the call, Jackson questioned his own actions. In 15 years of business, he had never taken such a personal interest in someone he barely knew. His carefully structured life operated on strategic relationships and clear objectives, yet here he was, creating a situation to see this young woman again. Meanwhile, in her small queen's room, Rebecca meticulously laid out her chef's whites for tomorrow, reviewing her recipes one last time before bed. The encounter with Jackson Reed felt surreal, like briefly stepping into another world before returning to reality. She assumed she would never see him again, unaware that he had just orchestrated their next meeting. As she dabbed a small amount of her grandmother's perfume on her wrists, a ritual before important days, Rebecca had no idea that the scent had already begun to unravel the carefully controlled life of one of New York's most powerful businessmen, or that tomorrow would bring an unexpected opportunity that would test both her culinary skills and her perception of the mysterious man she had met by chance. What Rebecca also couldn't know was that Jackson Reed wasn't just interested in her culinary abilities. For the first time in years, he had met someone who saw the world through uncynical eyes, someone whose genuine passion reminded him of dreams he had long ago suppressed in favor of building his empire. The luggage mix-up had brought together two people from entirely different worlds, and both their lives were about to change in ways neither could anticipate. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Bellini's bakery as Rebecca tied her apron with trembling fingers. The kitchen bustled with activity, pastry chefs expertly crafting delicate confections while line cooks prepared components with military precision. The gleaming professional equipment intimidated her, making her small apartment's countertop workspace seem like a child's play kitchen in comparison. "Turner!" Marcus Bellini's authoritative voice cut through the noise. The renowned chef approached, his salt and pepper beard and imposing presence commanding immediate respect. "I understand this is your first day, but we have an important client tasting this afternoon. I want you to observe and assist." Rebecca blinked in surprise. "Me, sir, but I just started. Consider it an education. Our client is sampling potential desserts for a new hotel. You'll assist Paul with service," he instructed, gesturing toward a stern-faced pastry chef who barely acknowledged her presence, "and bring one of your own creations." "My own?" Rebecca's voice rose an octave. "Your application portfolio showed promise with Mexican-French fusion concepts. Prepare a sample alongside your regular duties today. Something small but impactful." With that, Bellini turned and strode away, leaving Rebecca stunned. Throughout the morning, Rebecca absorbed everything like a sponge while tackling increasingly difficult tasks. Her hands, accustomed to years of baking, worked competently despite her nerves. During a brief lunch break, she flipped through her grandmother's recipe book, settling on a passion fruit and chili panna cotta with hibiscus caramel, a recipe she had perfected during late nights after long shifts at her previous jobs. By 3 o'clock, Rebecca's creation sat among the professional offerings in the private tasting room. She had been allowed exactly 45 minutes to prepare it between her assigned tasks, a nearly impossible time frame that had required every ounce of her skill and speed. "They're here," Paul announced tersely. "Remember, speak only if directly addressed." Rebecca nodded, smoothing her chef's coat as the door opened. Her heart nearly stopped when Jackson Reed walked in, accompanied by two associates in equally expensive suits. Their eyes met briefly, his expression revealing nothing while hers undoubtedly betrayed her shock. "Welcome, Mr. Reed," Bellini greeted him warmly. "We've prepared several concepts based on your specifications." Jackson nodded politely, his gaze sweeping over the elegant display before briefly returning to Rebecca. "Excellent. I'm particularly interested in options that showcase innovative flavor combinations. My guests at Reed Nouveau will expect the unexpected." The tasting proceeded with Bellini describing each dessert in detail, while Rebecca and Paul served. She remained silent as instructed, her pulse racing whenever Jackson sampled a creation, his face unreadable as he made notes. When they reached her panna cotta, she held her breath. "And this," Bellini said with slight hesitation, "is a concept from our new apprentice, a Mexican-inspired panna cotta with contrasting temperature and spice elements." Jackson raised an eyebrow slightly before taking a bite. For a fleeting moment, something changed in his expression, a flash of genuine pleasure before his professional mask returned. "Interesting," he commented. "The heat builds gradually without overwhelming the delicate passion fruit." What inspired this particular combination? All eyes turned to Rebecca, who hadn't expected to be addressed directly. "My grandmother," she began hesitantly, finding her voice. "She believed desserts should tell a story. This one represents contrast. Sweet meeting heat, smooth texture against crisp caramel shards. It's about unexpected elements finding harmony together." A moment of silence followed before one of Jackson's associates spoke. "It's certainly unique, but is it sophisticated enough for the Reed brand?" Jackson's eyes never left Rebecca's face. "Sometimes sophistication lies in authenticity rather than complexity," he stated. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Turner about her concept, privately." Bellini's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but he quickly nodded. "Of course, you can use my office." Minutes later, Rebecca found herself alone with Jackson in Bellini's cluttered office, her heart pounding. "You didn't mention I would be the client," she said, unable to keep the accusation from her voice. "Would it have changed how you prepared your dessert?" he countered. "Yes, I would have been even more nervous," she admitted, then narrowed her eyes. "Did you arrange for me to be part of this?" Jackson considered denying it, but found himself unwilling to lie to her. "Yes." Rebecca crossed her arms. "Why? Was this some kind of test?" "Perhaps," he acknowledged, "but not in the way you might think. I was curious about your work given your passion last night. So you used your influence to satisfy your curiosity." Her directness surprised them both. Jackson leaned against Bellini's desk, studying her. No one in his professional circle would dare speak to him so candidly. Instead of annoyance, he felt refreshed by her honesty. "Your dessert was the best thing on that table," he stated matter-of-factly. "Not the most technically perfect, but the only one with a genuine point of view. I want that for my new hotel." Rebecca's expression shifted from indignation to confusion. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'd like you to develop a signature dessert menu for Reed Nouveau. You would work on it alongside your apprenticeship, compensated separately, of course." Her jaw dropped. That's not possible." "I just started today. There are dozens of experienced pastry chefs who—" "None with your perspective," Jackson interrupted. "This hotel represents something new for my company. I'm looking for authenticity, not just technical expertise." Rebecca shook her head in disbelief. "This makes no sense. You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied simply. Before she could respond, his phone rang. Checking it, he frowned. "I need to take this. Think about my offer." He stepped outside to answer the call, leaving Rebecca reeling. When Jackson returned minutes later, his expression had hardened. "I need to leave. Business emergency. Here's my card with my personal number. Call me with your decision by tomorrow." As he turned to go, Rebecca found her voice. "Why are you really doing this, Mr. Reed? People like you don't just offer opportunities to people like me without a reason." Jackson paused at the door, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "Your grandmother's perfume reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Sometimes the most valuable things aren't what we're told to value." With that cryptic statement, he departed, leaving Rebecca clutching his business card in confusion. That evening, Rebecca sat on her bed surrounded by sketches of dessert concepts, still struggling to process the day's events. Her roommate, Jin, a nursing student who worked night shifts, listened in astonishment as Rebecca recounted the story. "So basically, a billionaire smelled your perfume, tracked you down and offered you a job creating desserts for his fancy new hotel," Jin summarized incredulously. "That's either the plot of a romantic movie or the beginning of a crime documentary." Rebecca laughed, despite her stress. "When you put it that way, it does sound ridiculous." "Have you Googled him?" Jin asked, reaching for her laptop. "Not really." "I know Reed Enterprises owns luxury hotels, but holy mother of—" Jin turned the screen toward Rebecca, showing pictures of Jackson at high-profile events, articles about his business empire, and estimates of his net worth. Rebecca, this guy is basically hotel royalty. The Reed family practically invented modern luxury hospitality. Rebecca scrolled through images of Jackson at charity galas, business functions, and occasionally with stunning models or actresses, his expression always controlled, revealing nothing. It seemed impossible that this was the same man who had sat across from her in a Queen's cafe discussing pastry techniques. There's more, Jin continued, clicking on another article. Apparently, the Reed Nouveau project is huge news in the business world. It's his first solo venture separate from the family company. His father thinks it's too risky and unconventional. Rebecca's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. The offer stands. Your perspective is exactly what this project needs, JR. He's serious, she whispered, showing Jin the message. The question is, are you going to do it? Jin asked. Before Rebecca could answer, her phone rang. Bellini's number. With trepidation, she answered. Turner, what exactly happened in my office today? Bellini demanded without preamble. Mr. Bellini, I'm so sorry if there was any inappropriate... Jackson Reed just called me, Bellini interrupted. He wants to work with you specifically on his project while you continue your apprenticeship. Do you understand how unprecedented this is? I do, sir. I'm as surprised as you are. This could be extraordinarily beneficial for your career and for this bakery, Bellini continued, his tone softening slightly. But I need to know if you can handle both responsibilities. I can, sir, Rebecca found herself saying, conviction growing in her voice. I've worked multiple jobs my entire life. This opportunity, I won't waste it. After the call ended, Rebecca sat in silence, her mind racing. Finally, she texted Jackson, I accept your offer, but I have conditions. Can we meet tomorrow? His response came immediately. Name the time and place. The next morning, they met at a small park near Bellini's. Jackson, dressed more casually in slacks and a sweater that probably cost more than Rebecca's monthly rent, listened as she outlined her terms. Complete creative control over the dessert menu, proper credit for her work, and a guarantee that the project wouldn't interfere with her apprenticeship. Agreed, he said simply when she finished. Rebecca studied him, still confused by his interest. There's something you're not telling me. Why me, really? Jackson hesitated, then spoke with unexpected candor. Reed Nouveau is my first independent project, separate from my family's company. My father believes it will fail because it deviates from our established formula. He paused. Your approach to pastry, honoring tradition while creating something distinctly your own, resonates with what I'm trying to accomplish. Before Rebecca could respond, a woman approached, her designer outfit and perfectly styled blonde hair marking her as belonging to Jackson's world. Jackson, darling, what a coincidence, she exclaimed, though her calculating glance at Rebecca suggested otherwise. I've been trying to reach you all morning. Victoria, Jackson acknowledged coolly. I'm in a business meeting. Victoria Harrington, daughter of Jackson's father's closest friend and his occasional date at high-profile events, assessed Rebecca with barely disguised disdain. Business? How interesting. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The charity gala committee was hoping you'd confirm your attendance for next week. Your father mentioned you might bring me as your +1. Rebecca felt suddenly self-conscious in her simple jeans and blouse, acutely aware of the vast social gap between herself and Jackson's world. I'll have my assistant contact the committee, Jackson replied neutrally. Now, if you'll excuse us, we were discussing an important project. Victoria departed reluctantly, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. That's your world, Rebecca stated quietly, and it's not mine. Jackson's expression darkened. That's exactly why I need your perspective for this project. Too much of that world is performance without substance. As they parted ways, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something far more complicated than a simple business arrangement. What she didn't realize was that Jackson's interest in her went beyond her culinary skills or her grandmother's perfume. For the first time in years, he had found someone who challenged his carefully constructed world and reminded him of the passion he had once felt before business and family expectations had taken over his life. What neither could anticipate was that forces were already in motion to complicate their budding professional relationship, forces tied to business rivalries, family expectations, and the collision of their vastly different worlds. 6 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. By day, Rebecca immersed herself in the demanding apprenticeship at Bellini's, absorbing techniques and traditions. During evenings and her one day off, she developed concepts for the Ried Nouveau dessert menu, working from a small test kitchen Jackson had arranged in one of his existing hotels. Their professional relationship evolved into something neither had anticipated. What began as formal meetings to discuss menu concepts transformed into engaging conversations that often stretched late into the night. Jackson found himself sharing the vision behind Ried Nouveau, a hotel that honored luxury traditions while breaking conventional boundaries. Rebecca shared stories of her grandmother's belief that food created connections across all divides. On a rainy Thursday evening, they sat surrounded by dessert samples in the test kitchen, debating the merits of different presentation styles. "The vertical assembly is more dramatic," Jackson argued, gesturing to the tower of delicate chocolate and spice components Rebecca had created. She shook her head, rearranging the elements into a more organic pattern. "But this tells a better story. It invites exploration rather than intimidation." Jackson watched her hands move confidently among the delicate components, struck by how much had changed in 6 weeks. The nervous apprentice had blossomed into a confident creator who no longer hesitated to challenge his opinions. More surprisingly, he found himself genuinely valuing those challenges. "You win," he conceded, with a rare smile, as usual. Rebecca glanced up, catching an unguarded expression on his face that made her heart skip. These moments had been occurring more frequently, glimpses of the man beneath the businessman facade. Their eyes held for a beat too long before she looked away, focusing intently on adjusting a chocolate garnish. The undeniable attraction building between them remained carefully unacknowledged by both. Rebecca reminded herself of the practical realities. He was her employer, from a world entirely separate from hers. Jackson maintained his professional demeanor, telling himself his interest was purely in her culinary vision. Both were lying to themselves. "The menu tasting for the investors is next week," Jackson said, breaking the moment. "Are you ready?" Rebecca nodded, though her stomach tightened with anxiety. "As ready as I'll ever be to serve desserts to a room full of billionaires. They're just people with expensive suits," Jackson replied with unexpected humor. "And none of them know desserts like you do." The elevator dinged, interrupting their conversation. Victoria Harrington stepped into the kitchen, her expression souring at the sight of Rebecca. "Jackson, you're impossible to track down these days," she complained, ignoring Rebecca entirely. "Your father sent me to remind you about the board meeting tomorrow. He's concerned about the Nouveau financials." Jackson's expression immediately closed, the walls Rebecca had gradually seen lowering snapping back into place. "The financials are solid. I'll be at the meeting." Victoria's gaze swept dismissively over the dessert samples. "Still playing with food? The board is beginning to wonder if you're serious about this project." Her eyes finally acknowledged Rebecca. "No offense to your consultant." Rebecca felt her cheeks burn, but kept her expression neutral. Over the weeks, she had grown accustomed to the barely veiled condescension from people in Jackson's circle. "Victoria, we're in the middle of finalizing a crucial element of the hotel concept," Jackson stated coldly. "I'll call you tomorrow." After Victoria departed with obvious reluctance, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. "I should go," Rebecca said finally, beginning to pack her equipment. "Rebecca," Jackson started, then hesitated. "Don't let Victoria bother you." "She doesn't understand what we're creating here." "And what exactly is that, Jackson?" Rebecca asked quietly, voicing the question that had been building for weeks. "Because sometimes I'm not sure anymore." Before he could answer, his phone rang, his father calling. With an apologetic glance, he stepped away to take the call, leaving Rebecca's question hanging in the air between them. The investor tasting arrived with intimidating speed. Rebecca stood nervously in the background as Jackson presented the Ried Nouveau concept to 12 impeccably dressed board members and potential investors in a private dining room. His father, Richard Ried, sat at the head of the table, his critical gaze missing nothing. "And for the final element of our sensory experience," Jackson concluded his presentation, "we've developed a dessert program unlike anything offered at other luxury properties. Rather than the expected classics with minor variations, we're presenting authentic stories through innovative flavor combinations." At his nod, Rebecca and 2 assistants began serving her creations, a progression of 5 small desserts, representing different emotional experiences, from a palate-opening bright citrus creation to a rich, complex chocolate finale incorporating her grandmother's special chili blend. Each dessert captures an element of the nouveau experience, Jackson explained, as the guests sampled the offerings. Traditional techniques merged with unexpected elements, creating something both familiar and surprising. The room remained uncomfortably silent as the powerful men and women tasted each course. Rebecca stood with her hands clasped behind her back, heart pounding as she watched their expressions. Finally, Richard Reed placed his spoon down deliberately. "It's certainly different," he stated, his tone making the word sound like a criticism. "But is different what our clientele wants? The Reed brand is built on reliable luxury, not culinary experiments. Our market research indicates a growing demand for authentic experiences among luxury travelers," Jackson countered smoothly. "Reed Nouveau will capture an emerging market segment while maintaining our standards of excellence." "And who developed these desserts?" Richard asked, his gaze finding Rebecca. "She seems rather young to be establishing the culinary direction for a $50 million property. Ms. Turner is a talented pastry chef who brings a fresh perspective to our brand," Jackson replied, his tone revealing nothing of their personal connection. Victoria, who had inserted herself into the tasting despite not being an investor, spoke up. "Jackson has been personally overseeing her work for weeks, quite hands-on management." Her implication hung in the air, causing several attendees to exchange glances. Rebecca felt her professional credibility being undermined before her eyes. The weeks of intense work, the pride she had taken in creating something special, all suddenly reduced to insinuations about her relationship with Jackson. "May I speak?" she asked suddenly, surprising herself as much as everyone else. Jackson looked startled but nodded. All eyes turned to Rebecca, who stepped forward, drawing strength from her grandmother's lessons about dignity under pressure. "The desserts you've tasted represent more than flavor combinations," she began, her voice gaining confidence. "They tell the story of connections, between tradition and innovation, between different cultures and experiences. That's what luxury travelers are increasingly seeking, not just premium ingredients, but meaningful experiences they can't find elsewhere," she continued, explaining the inspiration and technique behind each creation, her passion evident in every word. As she spoke, she noticed several of the investors leaning forward with genuine interest. "My grandmother taught me that the most meaningful experiences come from authentic connections," Rebecca concluded. "That's what these desserts offer, an authentic connection to something beyond the ordinary, which is the true definition of luxury." A moment of silence followed before one of the female investors spoke. "I found the progression quite compelling, particularly the contrast between the third and fourth courses. There's a narrative quality that's refreshing." Several others nodded in agreement, beginning to discuss the concept with growing enthusiasm. Richard Reed remained stone-faced, but the mood in the room had undeniably shifted. As the meeting concluded, Jackson pulled Rebecca aside. "That was remarkable," he said quietly. "You may have just saved the project." "I just spoke the truth," she replied, still processing what she had done. "Sometimes that's the most powerful thing," he responded, his eyes conveying something deeper than professional appreciation. The moment was interrupted by Richard approaching them, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Turner, your presentation was unexpected but effective," he acknowledged coolly. "Jackson, a word in private?" As Jackson stepped away with his father, Victoria sidled up to Rebecca. "Impressive performance," she said with a brittle smile. "But you should know, Jackson has a pattern of becoming temporarily fascinated with novel experiences before returning to what's familiar and appropriate. The Reed family has expectations about suitable connections, business and otherwise." Before Rebecca could respond, Victoria pressed an envelope into her hands. "Consider this an opportunity to exit gracefully before things become uncomfortable." Alone in the hallway, Rebecca opened the envelope to find a check for $50,000, more money than she had ever seen, and a note suggesting she pursue her culinary dreams elsewhere. The implication was clear: take the money and distance herself from Jackson and the project. That night in her Queen's apartment, Rebecca sat staring at the check, torn between outrage and practicality. The money could pay for advanced culinary training in Paris, something she had dreamed about for years. Jin found her still awake at midnight. "That's a lot of zeros," she commented, eyeing the check. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Rebecca admitted. "Taking it feels wrong, but it could change your life," Jin finished for her. "The question is, has your life already changed in ways money can't touch?" The next morning, Rebecca arrived at Bellini's to find Marcus waiting with a concerned expression. "Rebecca, we need to talk. I've received a rather unusual call from Richard Reed's office." Her stomach dropped. "What about?" "They've offered to fund a complete kitchen renovation and exclusive supplier contract, with the condition that you be released from your apprenticeship immediately to pursue other opportunities." Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. "They're trying to remove me from the Nouveau project by taking away my apprenticeship." Marcus looked genuinely troubled. "I can't afford to refuse the Reed contract, but this doesn't sit right with me. Take the day off. I'll stall them for 24 hours. Outside, Rebecca found herself walking aimlessly through the city streets, eventually arriving at Central Park. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Her simple clothing among the joggers in designer athleisure, her $2 coffee beside tourists with shopping bags from Fifth Avenue boutiques. Her phone displayed 3 missed calls from Jackson, but what could she say? That his family was systematically removing her from his life, that she had been offered what amounted to a bribe to disappear. As she debated what to do, her phone rang again. Jackson. This time she answered. "Where are you?" he asked without preamble, his voice tense. "I've been trying to reach you all morning." "Central Park," she replied simply. "Near the Bethesda fountain. Stay there. I'm coming to you." 30 minutes later, Jackson strode across the plaza, ignoring the curious glances from tourists recognizing the famous businessman. For once, he was dressed casually in jeans and a simple sweater, looking more like the man Rebecca had come to know during their late-night conversations than the intimidating executive. "My father tried to buy you off," he stated, as soon as he reached her, anger evident in his voice. Rebecca nodded, not surprised he knew. "And apparently bribed Bellini to end my apprenticeship." "I've already called Bellini. Your position is secure," Jackson assured her. "As for my father's check, I haven't cashed it," Rebecca interrupted. "But Jackson, maybe they're right. I'm not part of your world. This was always temporary." "Is that what you want, for this to end?" he asked, searching her face. Rebecca took a deep breath. "What I want doesn't matter. Your family, your board, they'll never accept someone like me being involved with the Reed empire." "This isn't about the dessert menu anymore, is it?" Jackson asked quietly. The question hung between them, acknowledging what both had been avoiding for weeks. "No," Rebecca admitted, "but that doesn't change reality." Jackson reached for her hand, a gesture so unexpected it left her momentarily speechless. "I've spent my entire life meeting expectations, my family's, the board's, society's. Building Reed Nouveau was my first step toward creating something that truly reflected my own vision rather than the Reed formula." He paused. "And then I met you. Jackson, you reminded me what passion feels like," he continued. "Not just for desserts or hotels, but for life itself. When you talk about your grandmother's recipes or creating something meaningful, I see the person I wanted to be before I became so focused on success." Rebecca felt tears threatening, "And I'm drawn to your determination, and how, despite everything, you still want to create something authentic in a world of pretense. But there is no but," Jackson interrupted gently. "I made a decision this morning. Reed Nouveau will proceed as planned, with your dessert menu as a centerpiece. If my family or the board can't accept that, I'm prepared to finance the project independently." Rebecca stared at him in shock. "You'd risk your position in the company for desserts?" Jackson smiled, the genuine expression transforming his face. "Not for desserts. For the chance to build something true to my vision, with someone who reminds me why that vision matters." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small glass bottle, a replica of her grandmother's perfume bottle, but new. "I had this made for you. The perfumer said he couldn't exactly duplicate your grandmother's formula, but it captures the essence." Rebecca accepted the bottle, deeply moved by the gesture. "Why?" "Because that scent led me to you," he said simply. "And whatever happens with hotels or dessert menus, I don't want to lose the connection we've found." In that moment, surrounded by the bustle of New York City, Rebecca made her decision. She would not be defined by where she came from or the expectations of others. She would build her own path forward on her own terms. "I'm not cashing that check," she stated firmly, "and I'm not walking away from what we've created together, the dessert menu or whatever this is between us. Good, Jackson replied, relief evident in his expression. Because I have a proposal for you. After Reed Nouveau opens, I want to back you in opening your own patisserie. Not as a Reed Enterprises venture, but as an independent investor who believes in your vision. Rebecca's eyes widened. You're serious? Completely. Your talent deserves its own showcase, not just a hotel menu. And selfishly, I want to see what you'll create when you have complete freedom. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in the gleaming kitchen of Essentia Patisserie, her own establishment in a charming Greenwich Village storefront. The display cases featured her signature creations, sophisticated desserts that told stories of cultural connections, each one labeled with its inspiration. In the corner, a special display highlighted the dessert collection created for Reed Nouveau, which had opened to rave reviews 2 months earlier. Jackson entered through the back door, having just returned from a business trip to Chicago. Unlike their first meeting, he now moved comfortably in Rebecca's world, just as she had learned to navigate his when necessary. Their relationship had blossomed slowly and deliberately, building on the foundation of mutual respect, established during those long nights developing the Nouveau menu. The Chicago expansion is set for next year, he announced, kissing her lightly. And the food critic from the Times was spotted at Nouveau last night, apparently raving about the dessert progression. Rebecca smiled, adjusting the small perfume bottle that now sat on a shelf above her workspace, a daily reminder of how an accidental luggage swap had changed everything. My grandmother used to say that nothing truly meaningful happens by accident, she mused, taking his hand. She believed the universe sometimes creates detours to lead us where we need to go. Smart woman, Jackson replied, pulling her close, though I might send that airline a thank you note anyway for their fortuitous baggage handling error. Rebecca laughed, the sound echoing through her kitchen, her own space created on her own terms, with the support of a man who had crossed social divides to find something authentic in a world of superficial connections. Outside, snow began to fall on New York City, covering the streets in a fresh blanket of possibility. Inside Essentia, the scent of jasmine and vanilla mingled with chocolate and spice, different worlds blending to create something entirely new, just like the unexpected journey that had brought a poor girl with a second-hand suitcase and a billionaire with everything except fulfillment together, through the simple charm of a grandmother's perfume.